Cole Drifter counted his last 3 coins against the frosted window, their copper faces catching the weak morning sun. February had teeth this year. The cast-iron stove wheezed its final breath as the last chunk of firewood crumbled to ash. 3 potatoes, a handful of flour, 2 strips of jerky hard as leather. The creek called him out for water. That's when he saw the blood drops, dark as garnets against fresh snow. They led to a crumpled form beside the frozen stream, a crow woman, her torn dress clinging to her trembling frame. Her blue lips moved in silent prayer. An empty parfleche bag clutched in her fist told its own story of starvation. Cole knew what helping her meant. His last food, his last warmth, maybe his life if her people came looking. He lifted her anyway, her weight nothing against his conscience. Some choices, he reckoned, weren't really choices at all. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The morning routine became their silent dance. Cole would heat water in the dented kettle, testing it against his wrist before bringing it to where the crow woman lay on his horsehair mattress. She'd stopped flinching when he approached, though her dark eyes tracked his every movement. He'd point to objects, speaking their English names slowly. Cup, blanket, fire. She'd repeat them, her voice hoarse but determined. Each word a small victory against the silence that had filled his cabin for 3 winters. By the 3rd day, her fever had climbed dangerous high. Cole wrapped her in his buffalo robe, the one luxury he'd kept from better times, and made the decision that would change everything. His father's gold watch sat heavy in his palm, its inscription worn smooth by years of handling. To my son Cole, may time be your friend. The 2-mile walk to Murphy's general store stretched long under gray skies. That's a fine piece, Murphy said, turning the watch over in his thick fingers. Swiss movement. Worth $40 easy in Denver. Need supplies, Cole said simply. Medicine, food, blankets. Murphy's eyes narrowed. Heard there's a crow woman missing up north. Stone Wolf's warriors are riding hard, looking for her. You wouldn't know anything about that. Cole met his gaze steady. Man finds someone dying. He helps. That's all I know. Murphy studied him, then nodded slowly. Your father would be proud. He pushed a generous pile of goods across the counter, airtights of tomatoes and beans, sorghum molasses, a precious bottle of laudanum, Arbuckle's coffee, fresh calico fabric, and 2 wool blankets. There's Indian trouble brewing. Cole, settlers gone missing near the Judith Basin. You best be careful. That evening, Cole made soup from the canned tomatoes and a precious potato. The woman was sitting up when he returned, the buffalo robe pulled tight around her shoulders. He ladled the soup careful-like, and as he handed her the bowl, her trembling fingers brushed his scarred knuckles, work-worn hands that had broken horses, built fences, failed to save a ranch. She didn't pull away. Instead, she pointed to herself and spoke clearly. Morning dove. Cole, he replied, touching his chest. She studied him with those deep eyes, then spoke a word in Crow, Hawaiiate. What's that mean? She struggled for the English, then managed friend. They ate in companionable silence, the coal oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the rough walls. Between spoonfuls, Cole found himself talking about the drought that took his ranch, the cattle that died standing, the bank that showed no mercy. Morning Dove listened with a stillness that invited more words than he'd spoken in months. Lost everything that summer, he said, staring into his coffee. Everything except this cabin and 40 acres of nothing much. Morning Dove set down her empty bowl and spoke haltingly. Storm. Separated. 3 days. No food. She gestured northward. My people. Searching. Stone Wolf, Cole said, recognizing the name Murphy had mentioned. Her eyes widened. My husband. War chief. She touched her chest. They think white men took. The weight of that settled between them. Cole understood now what sheltering her meant, not just sharing his last food with a stranger, but standing between 2 peoples ready to spill blood over misunderstanding. By the 5th day, Morning Dove's fever broke like a summer storm passing. She woke clear-eyed, and for the first time, attempted to stand. Cole steadied her, and she gestured toward the pile of mending he'd been neglecting. "I work," she said firmly. He tried to protest, but she'd already taken up his torn shirt, her fingers moving with practiced skill over the fabric. They worked in peaceful rhythm, him splitting kindling from old fence posts, her mending clothes and organizing his meager supplies with quiet efficiency. That night, as they shared another simple meal, Morning Dove taught him more crow words: boppy for day, bua for ground, bichet for his cabin. In return, he helped her with English sentences, both of them stumbling over unfamiliar sounds, occasionally sharing the smallest of smiles at their mistakes. "Your people," Cole finally asked. "They'll come." She nodded solemnly. "Stone Wolf. Not stop. He find me. Are you afraid?" Morning Dove considered this, then shook her head. "You are Hawate. Friend. I tell truth. They understand." Cole wished he shared her confidence. Outside, wind rattled the windows, bringing the smell of coming snow. He added another piece of wood to the stove wood he'd gathered that afternoon, working twice as hard knowing someone else depended on its warmth. "Why?" Morning Dove asked suddenly. "Why help enemy?" Cole looked at her, this woman who'd appeared at death's door, who'd trusted him despite every reason not to, who'd brought life back to a cabin that had held only shadows. "Never saw an enemy," he said simply. "Just saw someone who needed help." Morning Dove was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the rough table and placed her hand over his, a gesture that said more than either of their languages could express. Outside, the wind howled its warnings, but inside the cabin, for the first time in 3 years, Cole didn't feel alone. The pounding on the door came just after dawn, urgent enough to send Cole reaching for the Winchester .73 mounted above the fireplace. Morning Dove sat up sharp, the buffalo robe sliding from her shoulders, her eyes wide with sudden fear. Cole Drifter. Open up, man." Cole recognized Jake Harmon's voice, his nearest neighbor from 3 miles west. He lowered the rifle but kept it in hand as he unbarred the door. Jake near fell through the entrance, his horse lathered and steaming in the cold morning air behind him. "They're coming, Cole. 200 Crow warriors, maybe more, riding hard from the north." Jake's eyes found Morning Dove, and his face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Cole, tell me that's not who they're looking for." Morning Dove rose slowly, dignified despite her weakness. "How far do you? Day, maybe less." They stopped at the Benson place, asking questions. When old Benson couldn't tell them nothing, they burned his hay barn. Jake grabbed Cole's arm. "Every family between here and town is packing up, heading for Fort Brennan. You need to come now." "Anyone hurt?" Cole asked. "No, but only because Benson had sense enough not to reach for his gun. Cole, they're painted for war. Stone Wolf himself is leading them, and he's—" Jake's voice dropped. "They say he's gone half mad with rage. His wife disappeared 10 days back. They think white men took her for—" He couldn't finish the sentence with Morning Dove standing there. Morning Dove moved toward her torn dress hanging by the stove, now clean and partially mended. "I go. Stop this." "You can barely walk," Cole said. "I walk. I ride. I stop war." Her voice carried iron beneath its softness. "My husband. He is good man, but anger makes blind. If settlers die, soldiers come. If soldiers come, my people die, children die." She turned to Jake. "You have horse—" Jake looked between them, understanding dawning on his weathered face. "You're Stone Wolf's woman. I am Morning Dove, daughter of Black Kettle, wife of Stone Wolf." She stood straighter, every inch the chief's wife despite her obvious weakness. "I was lost in storm. This man saved my life, fed me his last food, sold his father's watch for medicine." Jake's jaw worked silently. Then he looked at Cole. "You damn fool. You beautiful, stupid damn fool." "Take her," Cole said suddenly. Take her to them. Tell them, no. Morning Dove's voice cut sharp. They not believe Jake, not believe any white man now, only believe if they see. She moved to the window, studying the horizon. They come here. They find me here. They see truth here. They'll kill him, Jake protested. Cole, they'll cut you apart before asking questions. Cole walked to the Winchester on the wall, ran his hand along its barrel, then deliberately placed it back on its pegs. He did the same with his Colt Peacemaker, checking the cylinder before setting it on the high shelf. Then I won't give them reason to. You're mad, Jake breathed. Maybe. Cole turned to Morning Dove. But she's right. Running makes us look guilty. Fighting gets people killed. Only chance is to stand here and tell the truth. Jake's face cycled through emotions: fear, frustration, and finally a grudging respect. At least let me stay. 2 witnesses are better than... No. Ride to town. Tell Sheriff Brennan what's happening. Tell him to keep those hotheads from forming a posse. Last thing we need is scared settlers making things worse. Cole. Go, Jake. Now. Jake looked long at his friend, then grabbed his shoulder. You're either the bravest man I know or the dumbest. Probably both. After Jake's horse disappeared over the rise, Cole and Morning Dove worked in grim purpose. She was too weak for much, but she directed while Cole prepared. Water barrels filled from the creek, windows covered with burlap sacks not for defense but to prevent misunderstanding, showing they weren't watching for targets. The ammunition for both guns counted, then deliberately locked in a trunk and the key hung visible by the door. You could still leave, Morning Dove said as they worked. I tell them you go to town. They not chase one man. Cole stopped nailing burlap over the last window. Your husband, is he a good man, true? Best man of our people, fair, wise. Her voice softened. But his love makes him dangerous now. He thinks white men hurt me. He will not stop until he knows truth. Then we'll tell him the truth. She studied him with those deep, knowing eyes. You risk everything for woman you know 6 days. Cole thought about that as he set aside his hammer. My father used to say a man's measure wasn't in the risks he wouldn't take, but in what he'd risk them for. He gestured around the sparse cabin. Don't have much left to lose anyway, but if standing here, telling truth, stops bloodshed, seems like a risk worth taking. As the sun climbed toward noon, they prepared pine-pitch torches, not for weapons, but for light, so the warriors could see clearly that no ambush waited. Cole dragged his 2 chairs outside, placing them in plain sight of the approach trail. If death was coming, he'd meet it sitting peaceful-like, showing no threat. You pray, Morning Dove asked as afternoon shadows grew long. Not for a long time. Pray now. To your God. I pray to mine. She began a low chant in Crow, her voice rising and falling like wind through grass. Cole found himself mumbling half-remembered words from his mother's Bible, prayers he'd thought forgotten. As the sun touched the western peaks, they heard it, the thunder of hooves, growing louder, closer. Morning Dove's chanting stopped. She gripped Cole's hand, her fingers cold but steady. Remember, she said, no fear. Fear makes men stupid. You stand. You speak truth. Stone Wolf will see. Cole nodded, his mouth too dry for words. Through the window, he could see the dust cloud rising, covering the sunset like a shroud. 200 warriors, maybe more, coming for justice or vengeance, and only truth standing between peace and massacre. He squeezed Morning Dove's hand once, then rose to light the pine torches. Whatever came next, it would come in light, not shadow. He walked to the door, lifted the bar, and set it aside. Then he sat in one of the chairs he'd placed outside and waited, hands visible and empty, as the thunder grew loud enough to shake the earth. The first riders appeared on the ridge, painted ponies and painted faces catching the last rays of sun. They flowed down the hillside like water, spreading out, surrounding the cabin in a living wall of warriors. Cole had seen cavalry charges during the war, had thought he knew what overwhelming force looked like. He'd been wrong. These men moved with purpose sharp as any blade, their formation perfect, their silence more threatening than any war cry. And at their head, on a black horse that seemed made of shadow and rage, rode Stone Wolf himself. Cole had expected war paint and fury. He hadn't expected the grief carved into the war chief's face, the kind of pain that could burn the world to ash and count it fair payment for loss. Stone Wolf's eyes found Cole sitting there, hands empty, no weapons in sight. And something flickered across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. But not mercy, not yet. The war chief raised his hand, and 200 warriors stopped as one, the sudden silence almost painful after the thunder. Stone Wolf dismounted, his movements deliberate, dangerous. He walked forward, each step measured, until he stood 10 feet from Cole's chair. When he spoke, his English was clear, educated, and cold as winter stone. "Where is my wife?" Cole stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. Behind him, he heard the cabin door open, heard Mourning Dove's soft footsteps. He didn't turn, keeping his eyes on Stone Wolf's. "She's here," Cole said. "She's safe. She's alive." And then Mourning Dove was beside him, her hand on his arm, speaking rapid crow to her husband. Stone Wolf's face changed relief, rage, confusion, all warring for dominance. His hand moved to the knife at his belt, and Cole knew the next moments would decide whether the sun rose on peace or blood. The first light of dawn painted the eastern peaks purple when the sound reached them, distant thunder that wasn't thunder, a rhythmic pounding that made the coffee cups rattle on Cole's rough table. Mourning Dove stood at the window, her fingers pressed white against the sill. She'd been standing there since before first light, watching, waiting. "Boppy," she whispered in crow. "Day." But her voice carried the weight of knowing this wasn't just any day. Cole stood beside her, his cavalry boots feeling heavy as stones. He'd polished them in the dark hours before dawn, some foolish notion that a man should look presentable when meeting his fate. Through the frost-etched glass, they watched the horizon birth a dust cloud that grew and spread like spilled ink across parchment. The thunder grew louder, resolving into individual hoofbeats, hundreds of them, moving in perfect synchronization. Then they crested the ridge not as a mob, but as an army. The warriors flowed down the hillside in disciplined waves, their painted ponies moving in formations that would have made any cavalry officer weep with envy. War bonnets caught the morning light, eagle feathers dancing in the cold wind. Some carried rifles with brass tacks hammered into the stocks in decorative patterns. Others held lances decorated with scalps and coop feathers. Their beaded war shirts caught the early sun, creating a rippling sea of color and purpose. They spread out with military precision, forming a living wall around Cole's 40 acres. No escape route left open, no ground left uncovered. These weren't raiders or wild men. These were warriors who'd fought the army to a standstill more times than anyone could count. At their center rode Stone Wolf. Cole had expected someone imposing, but Stone Wolf redefined the word, 6'3" even without the magnificent war bonnet that added another foot to his height. His face was painted in the traditional way, black across the eyes, red down the jaw, but grief had carved deeper marks than any paint could make. Eagle feathers cascaded down his back, each one marking a coup, an act of bravery in battle. His war shirt bore the scars of countless fights, decorated with porcupine quills and beadwork that told stories Cole couldn't read but could feel in his bones. The war chief raised a single hand, and 200 warriors stopped as one. The sudden silence hit harder than the thunder had. Every warrior's eyes fixed on the cabin, on the door where Cole now stood. "Ishbia," Mourning Dove said softly. "He waits. You must go to him." Cole's mouth felt full of sand. "What do I say?" "Truth. Only truth. Use words I taught you. He will understand you try to speak with respect. Cole took a breath that seemed to pull all the courage from the morning air. He opened the door and stepped out, keeping his hands visible, moving slow and deliberate like approaching a spooked horse. His polished cavalry boots crunched on the frozen ground, each step loud in the terrible silence. Stone Wolf dismounted from his black war horse, the animal's breath steaming in the cold. Up close, the chief was even more imposing. The coup marks on his arms weren't just decorative, each scar told of a time he'd touched an enemy in battle and lived. The kind of bravery that went beyond killing. The kind that said, "I could have killed you, but chose to count coup instead." Cole stopped 10 feet away and did something that surprised even him. He spoke in the broken crow that Morning Dove had taught him. "Kahe," greetings. "Die, Cole." "I am Cole." Then, struggling with the unfamiliar sounds, "Bila Hawate." "Your wife friend." Stone Wolf's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his stone face. When he replied, it was in perfect English, each word sharp as winter ice. "You dare speak our language while you hold my wife prisoner." "Not prisoner," Cole said, staying in English now but keeping his voice level. "Guest. Sick guest who nearly died. I found her by the creek 6 days ago." "Lies." The word came from another warrior, younger, his face twisted with rage. He pushed his pony forward, lance raised. "White men took her. We found tracks. White men's boots." "My boots," Cole admitted. "I carried her. She was dying." The young warrior, barely 20, with the fierce pride of untested youth, spat in the dirt. "This one lies. Stone Wolf. Let me make him speak truth." And the lance point dropped toward Cole's chest. "Red Sky." Stone Wolf's voice carried absolute authority. The young warrior's lance stopped inches from Cole's heart, trembling with barely restrained violence. "Where is Morning Dove?" Stone Wolf asked. And now Cole heard it, not just anger, but fear, the kind that could drive a man mad. Inside, safe, getting stronger each day. "Bring her. She'll come on her own. She's no one's prisoner." Red Sky laughed, bitter and sharp. "You give orders to Stone Wolf. You forget where you stand. White man. One word and 200 warriors." The cabin door opened. Morning Dove emerged, and the collective intake of breath from 200 warriors sounded like wind through a canyon. She wore the calico dress Cole had bought with his father's watch, clean and mended. Her hair was braided in the crow way, and despite her obvious weakness, she carried herself with the dignity of her station, a chief's wife, daughter of leaders. "Boxby." "Husband." Her voice carried across the space between them, and Stone Wolf took a step forward before catching himself. Then the questions came in rapid crow, too fast for Cole to follow. Stone Wolf's voice cycled through emotions: relief, anger, confusion. Morning Dove replied calmly, gesturing toward Cole, toward the cabin, toward the sky, as she apparently explained the storm that separated them. But Red Sky wasn't satisfied. He swung down from his pony, stalking toward Cole with the coiled violence of a rattlesnake. "She protects him because he threatens her. Look, see how she stands. She fears him." "I fear for him," Morning Dove corrected in English, ensuring everyone understood. "I fear what you might do to a man who saved my life." Stone Wolf moved closer, his eyes studying his wife's face, reading truths Cole couldn't see. "You were dying. 3 days without food. The storm." She switched to crow, speaking rapidly, and Cole caught a few words: snow, cold, hungry. Stone Wolf's face changed with each word, the stone mask cracking. "Show me," Stone Wolf said suddenly, turning to Cole. "Show me where?" "Show me how." Cole nodded and began walking toward the creek, acutely aware of 200 pairs of eyes tracking his movement. Several warriors kicked their ponies forward, following. including Red Sky, who kept his lance pointed at Cole's back. At the creek, Cole showed them the tracks still visible where the wind hadn't reached, the dark stains of blood on the rocks, the torn piece of dress fabric caught on a branch. Stone Wolf dismounted, studying the signs with a tracker's eye. "She crawled," he said quietly. "She crawled this far and could go no further. I found her there." Cole pointed to the spot. "Carried her to the cabin." Stone Wolf stood slowly, his grief transforming into something else, perhaps gratitude, perhaps just deeper confusion. Why? Why help an enemy? Cole thought of all the fine words he could say about human dignity and Christian charity. Instead, he spoke the simple truth. Couldn't let her die. Just couldn't. Red Sky made a disgusted sound. Pretty words. Perhaps he kept her for other reasons. Perhaps. Stone Wolf's hand shot out, gripping the young warrior's throat. "Speak carefully, Red Sky. That is my wife you insult with your implications." Morning Dove had followed them, leaning against the cabin wall for support. She spoke sharply in Crow, and Red Sky's face flushed with shame. Stone Wolf released him, and the young warrior stepped back, but his eyes still burned with suspicion when they looked at Cole. "I would see inside," Stone Wolf announced. "See where my wife was kept." Cole gestured toward the cabin. "It's your right." They walked back slowly, Morning Dove between them, each man ready to catch her if she stumbled. The other warriors watched in confusion, their war chief walking peaceful-like with a white man, their chief's wife seemingly protecting the enemy they'd come to punish. Inside the cabin, Stone Wolf's keen eyes took in everything. The single room, the one bed where Morning Dove had slept while Cole made his pallet by the stove, the empty shelves that spoke of poverty, the medicine bottles Cole had bought with his father's watch. Stone Wolf picked up the watch receipt from Murphy's store, reading the careful handwriting. $40 for medicine and food, blankets. Stone Wolf moved to the window where Morning Dove's torn dress had hung, now folded neatly. He studied the mended places, the careful stitching. She did this when she was stronger, wanted to help. Outside, Cole could hear the warriors growing restless, horses stamping, men murmuring, the tension building like storm clouds. Through the window, he saw riders on the horizon, white men from town, drawn by the dust and commotion. Jake must have reached them. Stone Wolf saw them too. His jaw tightened. "Your people come. I told them to stay away. They do not listen well. White men." "No," Cole agreed. "They don't." Stone Wolf turned to Morning Dove and spoke in Crow. She shook her head firmly, replying with obvious heat. They argued, or at least Cole thought it was arguing until he saw the slight smile tugging at Stone Wolf's mouth. "My wife says you are Hawate, friend. She says you have honor." Stone Wolf studied Cole with eyes that had seen too much, judged too many. "I must think on this." He strode outside, and Cole heard him calling orders in Crow. The warriors shifted their formation, turning to face the approaching townsmen as well as maintaining their circle around the cabin. Cole realized with cold certainty that he now stood between two armies, both ready to spill blood, both believing they were protecting their own. Red Sky appeared in the doorway, his young face hard with purpose. Stone Wolf thinks. But while he thinks, white men gather. They bring guns. They bring hate. He looked at Cole with something between respect and confusion. "If you truly saved her, we owe you gratitude. But if blood flows today, it will be because of you. Because you made us wait, made us doubt." The young warrior was right. Cole realized every moment of delay, every second of uncertainty, brought them closer to catastrophe. On the horizon, the townsmen had stopped, forming their own line. He could see the glint of rifle barrels in the morning sun. Morning Dove gripped Cole's arm. "Stone Wolf is wise. He will choose right." Cole hoped she was correct, because outside, 200 warriors waited for a single word, a single gesture. That would determine whether this day ended in understanding or massacre. And all Cole could do was stand in his doorway, hands empty, heart hammering, as the moment balanced on the edge of a knife. Morning Dove walked to the center of the gathered warriors, each step deliberate despite her obvious weakness. The morning sun caught the trade beads on her borrowed dress, sending small rainbows across the frozen ground. Stone Wolf moved to support her, but she raised her hand. This was her moment to speak, and she would stand on her own. She began in Crow, her voice carrying the formal cadence of important testimony. Cole understood only fragments, but he could read the faces of the warriors as she spoke. Skepticism gave way to attention, then to something approaching shame. Several of the older warriors touched their medicine bundles as she described the storm, the separation, the 3 days of wandering, lost and starving. Bilusua, she said, and Cole recognized the word for hungry. She repeated it 3 times, each time touching her stomach, and even the fiercest warriors shifted uncomfortably. To let a woman starve was a deep dishonor, whether she was enemy or friend. Then she switched to English, ensuring the approaching townsmen could hear if they drew closer. I fell by the creek. The cold had taken my strength. My bag was empty, no pemmican, no dried berries, nothing. I prayed to the spirits to let me die with dignity, not crawling in the dirt like a wounded animal. Her voice grew stronger. Then this man found me. He could have left me. Should have. Perhaps. He had almost nothing himself, 3 potatoes, a handful of flour, but he carried me to his home. She gestured toward Cole, and 200 pairs of eyes followed. Look at him. See his cabin. Count his riches. The sarcasm was gentle but clear. He has nothing, yet he gave me his bed, his food. His father's watch sold for medicine and supplies. Stone Wolf's face remained impassive, but Cole saw his hands clench and unclench. The war chief was processing this information, reconciling it with his assumptions about white men. He asked nothing. Morning Dove continued. Expected nothing. When my fever climbed, he sat with me through the night. When I called out in fear, he sang badly. But he sang the songs his mother taught him. Healing songs. Though he didn't know that's what they were. Red Sky pushed forward, his young face twisted with disbelief. He lies through you. Threatens you even now. Morning Dove turned on him with the fierce dignity of her station. Red Sky, son of Running Bear, do you call me liar? Do you say Morning Dove, daughter of Black Kettle, wife of Stone Wolf, speaks false words to protect a white man? The young warrior stepped back as if slapped. Around him, other warriors murmured. To question Morning Dove's word was to question Stone Wolf himself. But their attention was suddenly pulled away. From the north, 12 riders approached fast, led by Jake Harmon. They'd circled around, coming from an unexpected direction. Cole's heart sank as he recognized the riders, all good men individually, but together, armed and frightened. They were a lit match near gunpowder. That's close enough, Harmon Stone Wolf called out, his English perfect and commanding. Jake reined in his horse 30 yards away, his Spencer repeating rifle across his saddle. The other townsmen spread out in a rough line. Cole recognized Murphy from the general store, the Benson brothers whose barn had been burned, young Tom Mackenzie who'd lost his father to raiders 2 summers back. All wore wool greatcoats against the cold, all carried rifles, all looked ready to die or kill. We come peaceful, Jake called back, though his white knuckles on the rifle stock said otherwise. Just want to see Cole's safe. He is safe, Stone Wolf replied, as is my wife. Your wife. Jake's confusion was genuine. Cole's got your... Understanding dawned on his weathered face. Oh, sweet Jesus. One of the Benson brothers, the younger one, Paul, pushed his horse forward. They burned our barn, threatened our families. After you pointed guns at us, Red Sky shot back. After you lied about seeing nothing, we didn't know nothing to tell. The two groups were shouting now, accusations flying like arrows. Warriors raised lances, townsmen lifted rifles. Cole saw fingers moving toward triggers, saw hands gripping lance shafts. The moment balanced on a hairspring trigger, waiting for someone to make the fatal mistake. Then Morning Dove moved. She walked no. She glided to the exact point between the two groups. The morning sun backlit her as she spread her arms wide, the calico dress making her look like some strange angel of the frontier. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it carried a power that made everyone stop. Enough. She stood there, arms outstretched, a living barrier between two peoples ready to destroy each other. The image burned into Cole's memory, this woman, barely recovered from near death, standing alone between armies. You want war? She turned to the warriors, speaking in Crow, then translating to English. Then war you'll have. But not just today, tomorrow, next season, next generation. Your sons will kill their sons. Their sons will kill your grandsons. The ground will drink blood until it can hold no more. She turned to the townsmen. And you think you're protecting your families? You're signing their death warrants. Kill one warrior today, face 100 tomorrow, burn one barn, lose 10 homesteads. Where does it end? Jake Harmon shifted in his saddle. Ma'am, with respect, they came here armed. Because they thought you stole me. Morning Dove's voice cracked like a whip. Because for 10 days they believed white men had taken a chief's wife. What would you do? Jake Harmon, if someone took your Mary, would you come asking polite questions? Jake's face reddened. Everyone knew how devoted he was to his wife. But no one took me. Morning Dove continued, her arms still spread wide. I was lost. I was dying. And a good man, a white man with barely enough to feed himself, saved my life. She looked at both groups. This is the story. This is the truth. You can choose to believe it and live, or doubt it and die. Cole found himself walking forward, moving to stand beside Morning Dove. He said nothing words would only complicate, but his presence beside her spoke volumes. Here was the white man who'd saved a Crow woman, standing with her between their peoples. Stone Wolf dismounted and walked forward too, stopping on Morning Dove's other side. The symbolism was clear to everyone watching, the war chief standing with his wife and the man who'd saved her. But the barn, Paul Benson insisted, though his voice had lost its heat. They burned. I will pay for your barn, Stone Wolf said simply. In horses, 3 horses for 1 barn. Paul's mouth opened and closed. 3 Indian ponies were worth far more than his old barn. Red Sky looked betrayed. Stone Wolf, you would pay these? I would pay for my mistake, Stone Wolf interrupted. We came in anger. We burned without cause. This is not the way of true warriors. He looked at his men. We are Apsa'aluke, the Crow people. We do not war on those who save our women. An elder warrior, his face weathered as ancient leather, spoke from his horse. Stone Wolf speaks truth. The white man has shown honor. We cannot answer honor with dishonor. But Tom Mackenzie, young and full of grief for his dead father, wasn't satisfied. What about all the raids? All the killing? What about your soldiers at Sand Creek? Red Sky shot back. Your miners in our sacred hills. The tension ratcheted up again. Old grievances threatening to override new understanding. Morning Dove swayed on her feet, exhausted from standing, but she wouldn't yield her position between the groups. The past is dead, she said, her voice growing hoarse. We can't change it. But today, we choose. Today, a white man saved a Crow woman. Today, Crow warriors could choose peace. Today, white settlers could choose trust. She looked at both groups. Or today could be the day we all prove we're no better than our worst stories about each other. Cole caught Morning Dove as she started to fall, her strength finally failing. Stone Wolf was there instantly, taking his wife's other arm. Together, the white man and the Crow Chief supported her, and the image wasn't lost on anyone watching. Jake Harmon did something then that surprised everyone. He dismounted, set his Spencer rifle in his saddle holster, walked forward with empty hands. "Name's Jake Harmon," he said to Stone Wolf. "My friend here saved your wife. That makes you, well, I guess that makes us neighbors." Stone Wolf studied Jake for a long moment, then extended his hand. They shook, two men bridging a chasm of mistrust with a simple gesture. But not everyone was ready for peace. One of Stone Wolf's younger warriors shouted something in Crow, pointing at the brass buttons on Tom Mackenzie's coat, cavalry buttons from his dead father's uniform. Tom's hand went to his pistol. "Don't!" Cole shouted. But Tom was already moving, grief and fear making him stupid. Morning Dove broke free from Cole and Stone Wolf, throwing herself forward just as Tom's pistol cleared leather. She stood directly in his line of fire, arms spread again, protecting the very warriors who'd threatened her husband's peace. "You want to shoot someone?" she asked Tom quietly. "Then shoot me. I'm the cause of all this. My getting lost. My needing help. Shoot me and end it." Tom's hand shook. The pistol wavered. Tears ran down his young face. "Your father," Morning Dove said gently. "Did he die bravely?" "Raiders killed him. 2 summers back." "Not these raiders. Not these men." She stepped closer, close enough to touch the pistol's barrel. "Different tribe, different people. But you see an Indian and think, killer. They see cavalry buttons and think the same." She pushed the pistol down slowly. "When does it end? Tom Mackenzie, when do we stop?" Tom let the pistol fall to his side. His shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. "I miss him. I miss my pa." "I know," Morning Dove said simply. "We all miss someone." Stone Wolf spoke then, his voice carrying to all his warriors. "This woman speaks wisdom. We came for war and found truth. We came for vengeance and found mercy." He looked at Cole. "You saved my wife. The Crow people owe you a debt." "No debt," Cole said firmly. "No owing. Just peace. That's all." Murphy, the storekeeper, finally spoke up from his horse. "Stone Wolf, if you're willing, I'd like to trade. Fair trade. Goods for pelts, supplies for horses. Honest dealing." Stone Wolf considered this. "You would trade with us, after today. After today." Murphy laughed, short and nervous. "Sir, after today I'd be honored to trade with people who can stop a war with truth instead of bullets." Some of the warriors lowered their lances. Some of the townsmen eased their rifles down. The moment of crisis was passing, though Cole could feel how fragile the peace remained. "We need time," Stone Wolf said. "My people need time to understand. Your people too." "Time we got," Jake said. "Winter's coming. Good time for folks to think instead of fight." Morning Dove collapsed then, fully and completely, her strength utterly spent. Stone Wolf caught her, lifting his wife with infinite tenderness. He looked at Cole. "She needs rest, care. She stays here until she's well enough to travel," Cole said. "You're welcome to stay too. You and your men." Red Sky made a disbelieving sound. 200 warriors in your 40 acres. Why not?" Cole looked around at both groups. "Seems like a good time for neighbors to get to know each other." Stone Wolf's face showed the first real smile Cole had seen. It transformed him from war chief to simply a relieved husband. "You are either very brave or very foolish." Cole Drifter. "Both," Cole admitted. "Usually both." As Stone Wolf carried Morning Dove back to the cabin, the two groups remained frozen, unsure how to proceed. Then Murphy did something that broke the tension. He pulled out a twist of tobacco and offered it to the nearest warrior. The warrior looked suspicious, then curious, then accepted it with a nod. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a beginning. And as Cole watched white men and Crow warriors slowly, carefully, begin to stand down, he thought maybe, just maybe, Morning Dove's courage hadn't been in vain. The elder warriors gathered in a half-circle near the creek, their weathered faces carved by decades of sun and wind into maps of experience. Stone Wolf stood at their center, arms crossed, listening as each man spoke in turn. Cole watched from his doorway, Morning Dove resting inside, while the townsmen maintained their nervous vigil on the ridge. The eldest, a man with white hair braided with eagle-bone whistles, held a medicine bundle wrapped in soft deer hide. He spoke in measured Crow, his voice carrying the weight of many winters. Though Cole couldn't understand the words, he recognized the formal pattern of council deliberation. Each man would speak uninterrupted. Each voice would be weighed. Red Sky paced nearby like a caged wolf, clearly excluded from the elder council but desperate to influence it. Several times he started forward, only to be warned back by a sharp glance from Stone Wolf. The second elder, wearing a bear claw necklace that spoke of powerful medicine, gestured toward Cole's cabin as he spoke. His hands painted pictures in the air: a starving woman, a generous man, an empty shelf. The other elders nodded slowly, absorbing not just words but the wisdom beneath them. Dust rose from the south, and Cole's heart sank. Sheriff Brennan was coming, and he could already imagine how the lawman's authority would clash with Stone Wolf's. Brennan was a good man but prideful, the kind who believed his tin star gave him dominion over all situations. The sheriff arrived with 4 deputies, their horses lathered despite the cold. Brennan was a large man, belly straining against his vest, sheriff's star polished to mirror brightness. He swung down from his horse with practiced authority, adjusting his gun belt as he surveyed the scene. "What in the holy hell is going on here?" Brennan's voice boomed across the space. "Stone Wolf, you and your boys are way outside treaty boundaries. I could have the army here by—" "Sheriff Brennan," Stone Wolf's voice cut through the bluster like a sharp blade through soft leather. "You are interrupting council." Brennan's face reddened. "Council? You're holding council on American soil. That's not how this works. Chief?" The way he said chief made it sound like an insult. Several warriors shifted, hands moving to weapons. The deputies nervously fingered their rifles. Stone Wolf walked toward the sheriff with deliberate calm, each step measured and dignified. When he spoke, his English was precise, educated, a reminder that he'd spent 3 years at the Carlisle School back east before returning to his people. "Sheriff, my wife was missing. We searched. We found her here, saved by this man." He gestured toward Cole. "We are deciding how to respond to this situation." "I'll tell you how you respond," Brennan said, hooking thumbs in his vest. "You say thank you kindly and get back across the treaty line before what?" Stone Wolf's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Before you arrest us for seeking a missing woman, before you punish us for caring about our families." One of the deputies, a young man with barely enough whiskers to shave, spoke up nervously. "Sheriff, maybe we should—" "Shut it, Clarence." Brennan stepped closer to Stone Wolf, close enough that Cole could see both men's jaw muscles working. "I got 200 armed Indians surrounding a white man's homestead. That's what I see. That's what the army will see." "Then you see poorly," Stone Wolf replied. "Look again. You see 200 warriors who have not fired a shot, who have not harmed a single person despite believing white men had taken my wife. You see restraint, Sheriff. More than you are showing." The sheriff's hand moved toward his pistol. "You threatening me, Chief." Cole moved then, walking quickly to stand between them. "Sheriff Brennan, with respect, you're about to make things worse." "Cole Drifter, you stay out of— It's my land." Cole interrupted. "My cabin? The Crow are here as my guests." Brennan's eyes bulged. "Your guests? Have you lost your damn mind?" "Maybe," Cole met the sheriff's stare steadily. But it's still my land. Unless they're breaking the law, which they're not, you have no authority here. No authority. Brennan's voice climbed toward a shout. I'm the duly elected. A eagle-bone whistle cut through the argument, high and piercing. The eldest warrior had risen. Holding his medicine bundle high, he spoke in Crow, then surprising everyone, switched to heavily accented English. Stone Wolf, the spirits have spoken through our council. Everyone fell silent. Even Brennan seemed to recognize the gravity of the moment. Stone Wolf turned to face the elder, bowing his head slightly in respect. The elder continued, his English careful but clear. This white man showed honor. He saw not an enemy but a person in need. He gave when he had nothing to give. The old man's eyes found Cole. The spirits say, such a man is rare. Among any people. Another elder stood, younger but still grayed with years. We came for justice. We found it. Not the justice of blood, but the justice of truth. Stone Wolf nodded slowly, then turned to Cole. May I see once more where my wife recovered, I would understand fully. It was a request, not a demand. Cole gestured toward the cabin. Of course. As they walked together, Sheriff Brennan sputtered behind them. You can't just Stone Wolf. You get back here. I'm not done. Yes, you are, Stone Wolf said without turning. Go back to town, Sheriff. Tell them there will be no war today. Inside the cabin, Mourning Dove was awake, propped against the wall with the buffalo robe around her shoulders. She smiled weakly at her husband, speaking soft words in Crow. Stone Wolf knelt beside her, taking her hands in his, examining them as if to assure himself she was real and whole. Then he stood and truly looked at Cole's home. His eyes tracked across the empty shelves, the spaces where things had clearly been sold or traded. He picked up a daguerreotype from the mantel Cole's parents, the frame's silver backing recently polished but unable to hide the worn spots where Cole's fingers had held it over the years. Your family. My parents. Both gone now. Stone Wolf studied the image. Your father, he was the one who gave you the watch. Yes. The watch you sold for medicine for my wife. Cole said nothing. What was there to say? Stone Wolf moved to the kitchen area, noting the near-empty flour sack, the last few potatoes, the carefully rationed coffee. He opened a small wooden box and found it empty except for a few wanted posters Cole had used to start fires, the only paper he had. You gave her your bed. She was sick. You gave her your food. She was hungry. You sold your father's watch. She needed medicine. Stone Wolf was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of Cole's rough-hewn table where Mourning Dove had taught him Crow words, where they'd shared meals made from almost nothing. In our language, Stone Wolf said finally. There is a word, ichilakake. It means heart keeper, one who holds the heart of the people, who acts with the courage of compassion. He turned to face Cole directly. You are ichilakake. Cole felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what anyone would. No. Stone Wolf's voice was firm. Most would have ridden past. Most would have seen an enemy. You saw a person? He moved to the door, looking out at where his warriors waited. This must be known. This must be honored. They walked back outside where Sheriff Brennan was still blustering, now arguing with Jake Harmon about jurisdiction and authority. The sheriff fell silent when Stone Wolf raised his hand. Hear me, Stone Wolf called out, his voice carrying to both groups. This man, Cole Drifter, saved my wife when she was dying. He gave when he had nothing. He sold his father's memory to buy her life. He paused, letting the words settle. The Crow Nation declares him Ichilakake Heartkeeper. Any who would harm him, harm us all. Any who would trade with him, trade with our blessing. The warriors responded with a sound that made the townsmen reach for weapons, not a war cry, but an affirmation. A deep aho that rolled like thunder. Sheriff Brennan found his voice. Now wait just a minute. You can't just declare, I can and I have. Stone Wolf's tone brooked no argument. Furthermore, this place, these 40 acres, will be neutral ground, a place where Crow and white men can meet, trade, talk. He looked at Cole. If the owner agrees. Cole thought about his failing ranch, his empty shelves, his loneliness. Then he looked at Morning Dove, wrapped in his buffalo robe, smiling despite her exhaustion, at Jake Harmon, grinning like he'd witnessed a miracle, at the warriors and townsmen, still wary but no longer pointing weapons at each other. I agree. Red Sky suddenly pushed forward. Stone Wolf, this is not our way. We do not make peace with men of honor. Stone Wolf turned on the young warrior. We do not recognize courage when we see it. We do not repay kindness with kindness. His voice grew harder. Or would you have us be the savages they claim we are? Red Sky's face flushed, but he had no answer. Sheriff Brennan tried one more time. Stone Wolf, I can't have 200 warriors camping. We leave soon, Stone Wolf interrupted. But we will return. To trade. To counsel. To remember that peace is possible. He walked to Cole and, in full view of everyone, extended his hand. Not the grudging handshake of forced peace, but the firm grip of genuine respect. You have my gratitude, my friendship, my protection. Cole shook the offered hand, feeling the calluses of a lifetime of weapons, the strength of a leader, the warmth of unexpected brotherhood. Your wife has my friendship. She's welcome here always. Murphy the storekeeper suddenly called out from the crowd of townsmen. If we're trading, I'll throw in the first coffee and flour free. Call it an investment in peace. One of the Crow warriors responded by holding up a beaver pelt. Good fur for good blankets. And just like that, the air changed. Not all at once, there were still suspicious looks. Hands still near weapons, but the possibility of something other than violence had taken root. Sheriff Brennan stood in the middle of it all, his authority suddenly irrelevant, his badge meaning nothing in the face of what had just occurred. He looked at Cole with something between frustration and amazement. You realize what you've done, the precedent you've set. Cole thought about it, then shrugged. Set a precedent for not killing each other. I can live with that. Stone Wolf gathered Morning Dove in his arms, preparing to carry her to wherever his people would camp for the night. But before leaving, he turned back to Cole once more. The Council of Elders has decided, you are not just friend to the Crow, you are Crow, in all ways that matter. This is not a small thing. Cold Drifter, this is forever. As the warriors began to withdraw, not in defeat, but in dignity, the townsmen also started to disperse. But something had shifted. Cole could see it in the way Murphy nodded respectfully to a passing warrior, in the way Jake Harmon tipped his hat to Stone Wolf, in the way even young Tom Mackenzie watched the Crow leave with curiosity rather than hate. Sheriff Brennan was the last to go, shaking his head as he mounted his horse. This ain't over, Drifter. The Army won't like this. The Indian Agency won't like this. Maybe not, Cole agreed. But right now, today, nobody died. Nobody got hurt. That's got to count for something. Brennan looked like he wanted to argue, then just shook his head again and rode off, his deputies trailing behind like confused ducklings, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Cole stood in his doorway watching the dust settle. His cabin felt different now, not empty, but full of possibility. He'd started the day expecting death and ended it with something he'd never expected, hope. From the Crow camp being established near the creek, he heard singing, not war songs, but something else. Something that sounded like celebration. From the direction of town, he could see riders coming back Murphy with a wagon of goods to trade, Jake with what looked like a side of beef. Peace, Cole thought, might just be breaking out all over. The coal oil lamps cast dancing shadows across the cabin walls as men from two worlds crowded into Cole's small space. Stone Wolf sat at the rough table, his eagle feather fan laid respectfully beside him. Jake Harmon occupied the other chair, while Murphy leaned against the wall near the stove. 3 Crow elders sat cross-legged on the floor, their faces impassive but alert. Sheriff Brennan had refused to come, but his deputy Clarence stood nervously by the door. Morning Dove rested on the bed, wrapped in quilts, her breathing steady but shallow. She'd insisted the meeting happen despite her weakness, saying the moment couldn't be lost to hesitation. Stonewolf spoke first, his English careful and deliberate. "We propose trade, regular trade. Crow hunters bring pelts, dried meat. White traders bring cloth, tools, coffee." He looked around the room. "This place, Cole's land, becomes meeting ground, neutral, safe for all." Murphy nodded eagerly. "The pelts alone would be worth beavers getting scarce in white territory. And your people know where the best hunting is." "More than pelts," Stonewolf continued. "Our women know medicines, plants that heal. Your people get sick. We help. Our people need grain for winter. You help." One of the elders spoke in Crow, and Stonewolf translated. "He says we teach your children to track, to read the land. You teach our children the marking of words on paper." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "That's all fine, Stonewolf, but not everyone in town will agree. There's families lost folks to raids. They won't forget easy." "Different tribes," Stonewolf said firmly. "Sioux raids, Apache raids, not Crow. We fight them too." "Try explaining that to Tom Mackenzie," Jake muttered. "Or the widow Patterson. They see an Indian. They see they're dead." The meeting was interrupted by commotion outside. Angry voices approached the cabin, and Cole recognized Bull Harrison's drunk slur leading them. He stepped outside to find 6 townsmen, all armed, all reeking of whiskey. "There he is." Bull pointed an unsteady finger at Cole. "The Indian lover traitor to his own kind." Behind Bull stood the Benson brothers, Tom Mackenzie, and 2 ranch hands Cole didn't recognize. Their faces showed the ugly courage that comes from a bottle. "Go home, Bull," Cole said calmly. "You're drunk. Drunk on truth." Bull staggered forward. "You choose them savages over your own people. Your parents would be sick." Jake emerged from the cabin, followed by Stonewolf. The sight of the war chief made the drunk men step back, hands moving to weapons. "That's enough," Jake said. "Bull, Paul, Tom, you boys head back to town before you do something stupid." "Stupid," Paul Benson spat in the dirt. "Stupid is letting these murderers camp on our doorstep. Stupid is pretending they're anything but animals." Stonewolf stood perfectly still, but Cole saw the tension in his shoulders. One wrong move and violence would explode. "My barn," Paul continued. "They burned my barn, and I offered payment," Stonewolf said evenly. "3 horses. You refused. I don't want your blood ponies." Tom Mackenzie pushed forward, his young face twisted with grief and liquor. "My pa's dead because of Indians. Now you want us to trade with them, share meals." He looked at Cole with disgust. "You got their squaw on your bed. That's what this is really about." The insult hung in the air like a lit fuse. Stonewolf's hand moved toward his knife. The Crow warriors who'd been watching from the creek began moving closer. "Tom," Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. "You're grieving and you're drunk. I'll forget you said that. Once. But you insult Morning Dove again, and Stonewolf won't need to defend his wife's honor. I will." Jake stepped between them. "Nobody's defending anything with violence tonight." He faced the drunk townsman. "You boys have a choice. Leave now, peaceful-like, or I'll arrest you for disturbing the peace. You ain't sheriff. Harmon?" Bull slurred. "No, but I'm a deputy, and you're drunk and disorderly." Jake's hand rested on his pistol. "Choose." The moment stretched taut. Then Bull Harrison laughed, ugly and bitter. "This ain't over, Drifter. When them Indians show their true nature, when they start killing again, the blood's on your hands." The group staggered off into the darkness, their curses fading with distance. But the damage was done. The fragile peace felt cracked. Stone Wolf looked at Cole. Your people will not accept this. Some won't, Cole admitted. But some will. Change is never easy. They returned to the cabin to continue planning. But within an hour, everything changed. Mourning Dove's breathing suddenly became labored, her skin burning with fever. She moaned in her sleep, twisting in the blankets. Cole pressed his hand to her forehead and jerked it back. She's burning up! Stone Wolf was beside his wife instantly, speaking rapid crow. One of the elders hurried out, returning with a medicine bundle wrapped in deer hide. The smell of sweetgrass and sage filled the cabin as they began to burn the sacred plants. It's pneumonia, Murphy said quietly. Seen it before. The cold, the weakness it settled in her lungs. Cole grabbed his coat. I'll ride for Doc Hutchinson. He won't come, Jake said. Not for an Indian. Then I'll drag him. But Stone Wolf gripped his arm. No. If she is to die, she dies with her people's medicine. She's not going to die, Cole said fiercely. We need both your medicine and ours. The eldest Crow elder spoke, and Stone Wolf translated. He says the spirits are testing us, testing if we truly can be one people. Cole looked at Mourning Dove, her face flushed with fever, each breath a struggle. Then let's pass the test. What followed was a night unlike any the frontier had seen. Cole rode hard to town, not for the doctor, but for supplies, blue mass pills, morphine powder, mustard for plasters. Murphy opened his store in the middle of the night, giving freely. Even Widow Patterson, roused by the commotion, contributed her precious bottle of laudanum. Meanwhile, the Crow conducted their healing ceremonies. The elders sang songs that had been sung for generations, their voices rising and falling like wind through mountain passes. They waved eagle feather fans over Mourning Dove, driving away evil spirits. The cabin filled with smoke from burning sweetgrass bundles. Cole and Stone Wolf worked side by side through the night. When Cole applied mustard plasters to Mourning Dove's chest, Stone Wolf held her still. When Stone Wolf sang healing songs, Cole joined in with the few Crow words he knew. They took turns bathing her fevered face with cool water, holding her hands when delirium made her cry out. She calls for her mother, Stone Wolf said during one of Mourning Dove's quieter moments. Her mother died when she was young. How did you meet her? Cole asked, trying to keep Stone Wolf talking, keeping both their minds from the worst possibilities. She was trying to break a horse, a stallion too wild for any warrior. She was thrown 5 times, got back on 6 times. Stone Wolf almost smiled at the memory. I knew then she would be my wife. They applied another mustard plaster, the pungent smell mixing with the sweetgrass smoke. Mourning Dove's breathing was shallow, rattling in her chest. Cole prepared a dose of morphine powder in water, just enough to ease her struggle without suppressing her breathing further. Your medicine, Stone Wolf said, watching Cole measure carefully. You trust it. Sometimes it helps, sometimes not. Just like any medicine, Stone Wolf considered this. Your people think our medicine is superstition. Some do. But I've seen men pray their way through wounds that should have killed them. I've seen others die from scratches. Maybe it's not about the medicine. Maybe it's about believing something will help. The elder with the medicine bundle spoke, and Stone Wolf translated. He asks if you will join our healing circle, your spirit, your medicine, with ours. Cole didn't hesitate. Tell me what to do. They taught him the rhythm of their healing chant, his voice joining theirs in the ancient songs. He held the eagle feather fan while the elder prepared a tea from willow bark, not so different from the remedies Cole's own mother had used. They combined the ceramic bed warmer from Cole's trunk with heated stones wrapped in crow blankets. The night wore on. Jake came and went, bringing news that more townspeople were gathering, some to pray, some to protest. Clarence reported that Sheriff Brennan was threatening to wire the army, but inside the cabin, none of that mattered. There was only the fight for one woman's life and 2 people's future. Around 3 a.m, Mourning Dove's fever spiked dangerously. Her whole body shook with chills even as sweat poured from her skin. She cried out in Crow, in English, in languages that belonged to neither. Cole grabbed her burning hand while Stonewolf held the other. The war chief's face showed naked fear, the kind that comes from possibly losing everything that matters. "Don't let go," Cole said. Not sure if he was talking to Morning Dove or Stonewolf. "Don't either of you let go." The eldest elder placed his withered hands over both men's hands, binding them all together over Morning Dove's heart. He sang something low and powerful, a song that seemed to come from the earth itself. "What's he singing?" Cole whispered. "A song for the morning," Stonewolf replied, his voice thick, asking the sun to wait for her spirit to decide stay or go. They stayed like that, two men from different worlds, joined by an elder's hands and a woman's struggle as the darkness outside began to gray toward dawn. Morning Dove's breathing grew more labored, each breath a mountain to climb. Then, just as the first real light touched the eastern peaks, her fever broke. It didn't happen gradually. One moment she was burning, the next, her skin cooled. Her breathing, while still rough, deepened and steadied. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing first on Stonewolf, then on Cole, then on their joined hands. "Hawaiate," she whispered. "Friends." The elder released their hands and sat back with a satisfied nod. Outside, they could hear people gathering, both Crow and townspeople, drawn by word of the night's vigil. Through the window, Cole could see them standing in two distinct groups, but standing together, waiting for news. Stonewolf squeezed Cole's shoulder. "You stayed, all night. You stayed. So did you. She is my wife. She is my friend." Stonewolf was quiet for a moment. "The elder says the spirits have spoken. We passed the test." He looked out at the gathering crowd. "Now we see if our peoples can do the same." As the sun rose fully, painting the cabin in golden light, Morning Dove managed a weak smile. She looked at the mustard plaster on her chest, the eagle feather fan in Cole's hand, the medicine bundle beside the ceramic bed warmer, and understood. "Two medicines," she said softly. "Two peoples. One hope." Cole stepped outside to face the crowd, Stonewolf beside him. Jake Harmon stood with the townspeople, Murphy next to him. Even Tom Mackenzie was there, sober now and shamefaced. On the other side, Crow warriors waited with their families, including some women and children Cole hadn't seen before. "She lives," Cole announced simply. The sound that rose wasn't quite a cheer. Too much suspicion remained for that. But it was relief, shared relief, and that was enough for now. Some of the Crow women began singing a song of gratitude. A few townswomen joined in with a Christian hymn. The melodies didn't match, but somehow they harmonized. Sheriff Brennan arrived as the crowd was dispersing, his face red with frustration. "Drifter, I've got the army asking questions. The Indian agent wants a report. What am I supposed to tell them?" Cole looked at Stonewolf, at Morning Dove visible through the doorway, at the two groups of people slowly mingling rather than standing apart. "Tell them the truth, Sheriff. Tell them peace broke out, and nobody could stop it." The morning air carried the mingled scents of two worlds cooking. From the Crow camp by the creek rose the sweet smoke of chokecherry pudding simmering in iron pots, while from the direction of town came Murphy's wagon loaded with flour sacks and coffee. Women from both communities had arrived at dawn, drawn by word that Morning Dove had survived the crisis and that something unprecedented was about to happen. Cole stood in his doorway watching the careful dance of preparation. Crow women laid out blankets in a wide circle despite the cold ground, their hands moving efficiently as they arranged wild turnips and strips of pemmican on wooden plates. Sarah Harmon, Jake's wife, approached them cautiously with a Dutch oven full of Johnny cakes, still steaming from her kitchen. The women regarded each other across the divide of language and custom. Then one of the Crow grandmothers smiled and gestured to a spot beside her. "Washtay," the grandmother said, one of the few Lakota words that had crossed into common use, meaning good. Sarah set down her pot and attempted to repeat the word, mangling it badly enough that several Crow children giggled. But the grandmother's approving nod transformed nervousness into the beginning of something else. Morning Dove sat wrapped in blankets on a chair Cole had carried outside, her face still pale but her eyes bright with satisfaction as she watched the communities slowly blend. Stonewolf stood beside her, translating when needed, but increasingly the women were finding ways to communicate without words, pointing, demonstrating, sharing tastes of unfamiliar foods. Sheriff Brennan arrived mid-morning, his reluctance visible in every heavy step. He'd brought a leather portfolio and an inkwell, his badge polished to uncomfortable brightness. Behind him came Clarence, carrying a small writing desk that he set up near Cole's table, now moved outside into the weak winter sun. "I still think this is foolishness," Brennan muttered to Cole. "No legal authority, no proper jurisdiction." "Sometimes the law has to catch up to what's right," Cole replied. "Besides, would you rather have 200 Crow warriors riding through the county whenever they please? Or would you rather have agreed-upon times and places?" Brennan grunted but pulled out his papers. "The Indian agent will have my hide for this." Stonewolf approached with two of his elders and a young Crow man carrying his own papers, written in careful English. "This is Joseph Flying Hawk," Stonewolf introduced him. "He studied at Carlisle School, like me. He will write our words." The sheriff's eyes widened. "You're making your own record. Would you trust our agreement only to your papers?" Stonewolf asked mildly. As the men gathered around the table, the women continued their work. A Crow woman named Singing Bird showed Sarah Harmon how to identify prairie sage, good for settling the stomach. Sarah demonstrated her method for preserving vegetables in salt brine, carefully showing the proportion of salt to water. Children began to venture closer to each other, the universal curiosity of youth overcoming their parents' warnings. Cole found himself constantly moving between groups, translating not just words but intentions. When Stonewolf used the Crow concept of walking the same trail, Cole explained to Brennan it meant more than just peace, it meant shared purpose. When Brennan spoke of legal boundaries, Cole helped Stonewolf understand he meant not just lines on maps but promises about behavior. 4 times each year, Stonewolf was saying, at the change of seasons, my people come to trade, no more than 50 at one time, unless special arrangement. "And they camp where Brennan asked, his pen scratching across paper. "Here," Cole said. "On my land. I've got 40 acres and nothing to lose." "You're a fool, drifter," the sheriff said, but there was something like respect in his voice. Joseph Flying Hawk spoke up, his English formal from education. "We request that Cole Drifter be recognized as official translator and mediator. Both sides trust him." "I don't have authority to make him an official anything," Brennan protested. "Then we make him official by our agreement," Stonewolf said simply. "Your paper law is not the only law." As they worked through details where to cross the creek, what to do if disputes arose, how to handle young men from either side who might cause trouble, the crowd around them grew. Tom Mackenzie stood at the edge, his face unreadable. The Benson brothers had come, drawn perhaps by curiosity or the promise of free food. Even Widow Patterson appeared, her black dress severe among the colorful gathering. It was young Tom who broke his own bitter silence. He approached Stonewolf directly, his shoulders tense but determined. "My pa's dead. Indians killed him. Not Crow, I'm told, but Indians just the same." Stonewolf regarded him steadily. "My brother is dead. White soldiers killed him. Not these soldiers, but white men just the same." Tom's jaw worked. "How do we get past it?" "We don't," Stonewolf said simply. "We carry it, but we choose not to pass it on." He gestured toward where children were beginning to play, a cautious game of tag crossing cultural lines. "They don't carry our grief unless we give it to them." A Crow boy, perhaps 7 years old, approached one of the settler children with a small wooden horse, beautifully carved. The white child, a girl about the same age, offered her cloth doll in trade. They couldn't speak each other's language, but they understood the universal principle of fair exchange. Murphy had set up an impromptu trading post near the cabin, laying out steel needles, turkey red cloth, and small mirrors on a blanket. Crow women examined the goods with practiced eyes while their husbands displayed beaver pelts, worked leather, and beaded goods. The first trade was simple, a beautifully crafted bone awl for a packet of steel needles. Both parties seemed satisfied, even pleased. "See there?" Murphy called out to the watching crowd. "Fair trade, honest dealing, that's all it takes." Not everyone was convinced. Bull Harrison had arrived, sober but surly, standing with a group of ranch hands who muttered among themselves. But when a Crow woman offered him a taste of pemmican dried meat pounded with berries and fat curiosity won over suspicion, he chewed thoughtfully, then nodded approval, which seemed to surprise him more than anyone. The document was taking shape on Cole's table, written in both English and with symbols Joseph Flying Hawk assured them would convey the meaning to non-literate Crow. It wasn't a treaty in any official sense. Brennan lacked that authority, and Stonewolf couldn't speak for all Crow people, but it was an agreement between neighbors, a promise to try. "What about violations?" Brennan asked. "What if someone breaks the peace?" "They answer to both communities," Stonewolf said. "A white man harms a Crow. You punish him, and we witness. A Crow harms a white man. We punish him, and you witness. Justice seen by all." As the sun reached its zenith, the women called everyone to eat. It was a feast unlike any the frontier had seen. Crow and settler food side by side, people cautiously sampling unfamiliar dishes, children already mixing freely as they grabbed food and ran off to play. Cole found himself sitting between worlds, translating jokes that didn't quite cross language barriers, explaining customs, mediating minor misunderstandings about proper eating etiquette. Mourning Dove, despite her weakness, held court from her chair, teaching settler women Crow words while learning English ones in return. "Your word for buffalo," she said to Sarah Harmon. "Buffalo. Our word is bichet, but we both mean the same animal, the same gift of life." Sarah repeated the word carefully. "Bichet. And bread." She held up a piece of Johnny cake. "Papa." Mourning Dove replied, then laughed softly. "Though our bread and your bread are different, both fill the stomach." As afternoon wore on, an unexpected music began. One of the Crow men had brought a drum, its steady beat carrying across the gathering. Then Jake Harmon pulled out a harmonica, the reedy sound mixing strangely but not unpleasantly with the drum. Children began dancing, not traditional dances from either culture but the wild, free movement of youth discovering joy. The moment Cole would remember forever came when he saw them in the snow, a group of children, Crow and white, building a snowman together. They argued in two languages about where to place the eyes, compromising finally on one stone and one bead. Their laughter rang out pure and untainted by their parents' history. Stonewolf appeared beside him. "This is what Mourning Dove saw. This possibility." "She's wiser than both of us," Cole admitted. "Yes." Stonewolf was quiet for a moment. "You know this peace is fragile. One death, one misunderstanding, and it shatters." "I know." "Then we must be strong. You and I, we must stand between our peoples when the anger comes, and it will come." Cole nodded. "I'll stand." As the sun began to descend, painting the gathering in golden light, the formal document was ready. Sheriff Brennan read it aloud in English, Joseph Flying Hawk in Crow. It was simple, an agreement for seasonal trade, mutual respect, and Cole's land as neutral ground. It wouldn't hold up in any court, but that wasn't the point. Stonewolf signed with his mark, a Thunderbird symbol. Brennan signed his name with a flourish. Then they looked at Cole. "You sign too," Stonewolf said. "As witness, as bridge." Cole took the pen, his hand steady as he signed his name on both documents. The crowd watched in silence as history was made in small letters on rough paper. As the gathering began to break up, families returning to their separate communities, Mourning Dove called Cole over. From beneath her blanket, she pulled out a beaded medicine bag, worked with blue and white beads in a pattern that seemed to capture starlight. "For you," she said simply. "Carry it always." Cole took the small bag, feeling the weight of more than beads and leather. I don't have anything. You gave everything. Morning Dove interrupted. Your food, your warmth, your father's watch, but more you gave us hope that two peoples can be one. She smiled, tired but genuine. The bag carries protection, not from bullets or knives, but from the hatred that makes men use them. As darkness fell and the last wagons rolled away, Cole stood in his doorway watching the Crow camp by the creek, their fires reflecting off the water. In town, he could see lights coming on, families settling in for evening meals where the talk would be of the strange day when Indians and whites ate together. Between them stood his cabin, no longer a lonely outpost but a bridge between worlds. The medicine bag rested against his chest, warm with promise. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the Indian agent's anger, the army's questions, the inevitable tensions of change. But tonight, for the first time in years, Cole didn't feel alone. From the Crow camp came singing, low and beautiful. From town, church bells rang the evening hour. The sounds shouldn't have harmonized, but somehow, across the cold distance, they did. Stone Wolf had been right, the peace was fragile. But as Cole watched children's footprints in the snow, crossing and recrossing between the two communities, he thought maybe fragile things could grow strong if enough people chose to protect them. He went inside, added wood to his stove, and sat at his table where history had been written. The empty spaces on his shelves didn't look so empty anymore. They looked like room for something new to grow. 3 months had passed since the night Morning Dove nearly died, and spring had come to the valley with a gentleness that seemed to reflect the new peace. The snow had melted away gradually, revealing not the scarred earth of conflict but ground ready for planting. Cole stood outside his cabin in the early morning light, watching wagons arrive from both directions, Crow families from the north, settlers from the south, all converging on what folks had started calling Drifter's Crossing. His 40 acres had transformed. Where once stood only a lonely cabin and empty corrals, now there were 3 permanent structures, a trading post built from logs donated by both communities, a covered pavilion for meetings, and a small schoolhouse where children from both peoples learned letters and tracking, English and Crow, side by side. The morning air rang with purposeful noise. Crow women were setting up their spring goods, beautifully worked leather, beaded moccasins, and medicinal herbs gathered from secret places in the mountains. Settler families arranged their own offerings, seed corn from Missouri, steel tools from back east, bolts of bright calico that caught the morning sun. But more than goods were being exchanged. Cole watched as Sarah Harmon consulted with Singing Bird about which herbs would help her youngest child's persistent cough, while Singing Bird's son stood nearby, carefully writing the prescription in both English and Crow symbols that Joseph Flying Hawk had been teaching. You've done something remarkable here, Drifter. Cole turned to find Marcus Whitfield standing beside him, the man's eastern clothes still crisp despite the frontier dust. Whitfield was from the railroad company, come to survey possible routes through the territory. He'd arrived 2 days ago with an offer that would have made Cole wealthy, buy out his land for 10 times what it was worth, establish a depot here where the railroad could control all trade between peoples. I've done nothing but avoid bloodshed, Cole replied, watching a Crow boy teach a settler girl how to whistle like a meadowlark. That's more than most manage out here. Whitfield pulled out his leather portfolio. The offer stands. You could go anywhere, start fresh. San Francisco, Denver, even back east. You'd never have to work again. Before Cole could answer, Stone Wolf approached with his characteristic quiet dignity. The war chief had aged these 3 months, but it was a good aging. The lines around his eyes came from smiling as much as from worry. He wore a mixture of traditional dress and trader's goods, his war shirt adorned with brass buttons bartered from Murphy's store. Mr. Whitfield speaks of buying, Stone Wolf said in his careful English, but some things cannot be sold. Whitfield's jaw tightened. He'd tried negotiating directly with Stone Wolf about establishing trade agreements, bypassing Cole entirely, but the chief had simply stared at him in silence until he gave up. Progress is coming whether you want it or not, Chief, Whitfield said. The railroad will be built. Your people would be wise to profit from it. Stonewolf looked at Cole, a question in his eyes. They'd discussed this privately, the inevitability of change, the need to shape it rather than be crushed by it. Cole nodded slightly, and Stonewolf turned back to Whitfield. Progress. Stonewolf tasted the word. Your iron horse brings progress. Also brings soldiers, whiskey, men who see land and want to take. We know progress. He gestured toward the trading post. This is better progress, slow progress, progress where both peoples choose the pace. Whitfield shook his head. You're fools, both of you. This little paradise you've built, it can't last. One incident, one death, and it all comes crashing down. Maybe, Cole admitted. But isn't it worth trying? The railroad man left that afternoon, his offer rejected for the third time. Cole watched his carriage disappear over the ridge and felt no regret. The wealth Whitfield offered was just paper and promises. What existed here was real children playing together, families trading fairly, old enemies becoming new friends. The spring planting had brought everyone together. It was Murphy's idea, originally combined the Crow knowledge of native plants with settler farming techniques. Create something new. The two communities had designated 10 acres of Cole's land as common ground, to be worked and harvested collectively. Cole was helping to mark rows when young Tom Mackenzie approached, a Crow girl beside him. Cole recognized her little dove, Red Sky's sister. She was perhaps 18, pretty in the shy way of one caught between two worlds. Tom's face was red with sunburn and something else. Mr. Drifter, Tom began, then stopped, cleared his throat, started again. Cole, that is, Little Dove and I. The girl spoke, her English accented, but clear. We wish to marry. Cole set down his marking stake. He'd seen this coming, the long looks, the careful meetings at the trading post, the way Tom had begun learning Crow with more dedication than any other settler. But knowing it was coming didn't make it simpler. Your families know. Tom's face darkened. Ma says she'll disown me. Says Pa would roll in his grave. My brother says I betray our people, Little Dove added quietly. But we love each other. Cole looked at them, so young, so determined, so naive about the challenges ahead. You know what you're asking for. The hardship. Neither community fully accepting you. We know, Tom said firmly. But isn't that what this place is about? Finding new ways. Before Cole could answer, Stonewolf approached with Red Sky. The young warrior's face was stone, his disapproval evident, but Stonewolf raised his hand for silence. My nephew has told me of this. Stonewolf said to Cole, What do you think? Cole was surprised to be consulted, but understood he'd become the unofficial arbiter of disputes between communities, the one both sides trusted to be fair. I think love finds its own way. I think these two will marry with or without our blessing. The question is whether we make them outcasts or examples. Red Sky spat in the dirt. Examples of weakness or examples of courage, Stonewolf countered. He studied the young couple. You would live where? Here, Tom said quickly. Cole's offered us work at the trading post. We can build a cabin nearby. Stonewolf was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in Crow to Red Sky. The young warrior argued back, gesturing angrily, but Stonewolf's voice remained calm and firm. Finally, Red Sky threw up his hands and stalked away, but not before giving his sister a look that might have been sorrow rather than anger. You have my permission, Stonewolf said. Not my blessing. Not yet. That must be earned. But permission to try. Tom's mother proved harder to convince. It took Sarah Harmon and 3 other women from town to talk her around, and even then, she wept through the ceremony. 2 weeks later, a strange mixture of Crow and Christian traditions that satisfied no one completely but somehow felt right. As spring deepened toward summer, other changes became permanent. Doc Hutchinson, the town physician who'd initially refused to treat Mourning Dove, now made weekly visits to learn from the Crow medicine men. Cole had found him one afternoon sitting with the eldest Crow healer, comparing willow bark tea to his manufactured aspirin, both men amazed to discover they were essentially the same medicine. 40 years of medical school, Hutchinson muttered, and these savages knew half of it already through tree bark and prairie flowers. The school had been Mourning Dove's particular project. She'd recovered fully from her pneumonia, though Cole noticed Stone Wolf never let her far from his sight now. She taught Crow children English while Sarah Harmon taught settler children their letters. But more than language was shared stories crossed between cultures, myths and legends that weren't so different when you looked close enough. Cole was translating at the school one afternoon when Mourning Dove pulled him aside. Her condition was obvious now, the roundness of pregnancy showing beneath her dress. "I have news," she said, smiling. "The baby quickens. It will come with the harvest moon. Stone Wolf must be proud. He is terrified." She laughed. "The great war chief who faced soldiers without blinking is afraid of a baby." Her expression grew serious. "We've chosen a name, if it's a boy." Cole waited, seeing something significant in her eyes. "In our language, he will be called Sapua. It means far-seer. But his familiar name, what friends will call him," she paused, "will be Cole." Cole felt his throat tighten. "Mourning Dove, I don't deserve. You deserve more than we can give. But a name, a child to carry forward what you started here this we can do." By late spring, the trading post had become profitable enough that Cole could afford lumber for improvements. He stood one evening looking at his ledgers, amazed to find himself prosperous for the first time in his life. Not from the single big score that Whitfield had offered, but from dozens of small exchanges, translation services, trading mediation, even guide work for travelers who wanted safe passage through what was now seen as peaceful territory. The sun was setting when Stone Wolf found him, carrying something wrapped in deerskin. "Cole Drifter, I have something for you." Stone Wolf unwrapped a beautiful pipe tomahawk, its handle carved with symbols Cole was learning to read: friendship, bridge, peace. But more than decorative, it was functional, perfectly balanced. "I name you brother," Stone Wolf said formally. "Not just friend, not just ally. Brother, this means my family is your family. My people are your people. Forever." Cole took the tomahawk reverently. "Stone Wolf, also this." Stone Wolf pulled out something that stopped Cole's words: his father's gold watch, the one he'd sold to Murphy months ago. "How? I bought it back. Had Murphy order it from whoever bought it in Denver. Cost me 20 horses. But Murphy says that's fair." Stone Wolf pressed the watch into Cole's hands. "A man should not lose his father's memory for kindness." Cole opened the watch, read again the inscription: "To my son Cole, may time be your friend." Time had become his friend, he realized. These months had brought more meaning than all his years before. As summer approached, the spring planting was ready for first harvest, early vegetables that would test whether this cooperative farming could work. Both communities gathered for the harvest, working side by side in the rows. Cole watched an elderly Crow woman teaching a young settler girl which plants were weeds and which were medicine hiding among the crops. Nearby, Jake Harmon and a Crow warrior named Tall Bear argued good-naturedly about whether horses or oxen were better for plowing, their debate requiring no translation as they gestured and laughed. Sheriff Brennan arrived near sunset, his usual sour expression replaced by something approaching wonder. "Drifter, I've just come from the territorial capital. They want a full report on what you've done here." "What we've done," Cole corrected. "They're calling it unprecedented. The governor wants to visit, see this experiment in cooperative living himself." Cole looked around at the scene: Crow and settler families sharing the evening meal, children running between the groups without distinction, young couples like Tom and Little Dove representing a future neither side had imagined possible just months ago. "Tell the governor he's welcome," Cole said. "But tell him to leave his soldiers behind. We've got our own peace here, and it wasn't built with guns." As full darkness fell and families began heading home, some to the Crow camp, some to town, some to the handful of mixed households that had begun sprouting up around the trading post. Cole stood in his doorway watching. His cabin was no longer empty. The shelves Murphy had helped him build were full of goods and gifts from both communities. The walls held Crow artwork next to settler photographs. His table, where the peace document had been signed, now hosted regular meals with friends from both peoples. Mourning Dove and Stone Wolf stopped before leaving. Mourning Dove moving carefully with her pregnancy. She touched Cole's face gently, a sister's gesture. "You gave us a future," she said simply. "You gave me a purpose." Cole replied, after they left. Cole sat on his step, his father's watch in one hand, the medicine bag Mourning Dove had given him in the other. The spring night was warm, full of promise. From the Crow camp came singing celebration songs now, not war songs. From town came the sound of Murphy's fiddle, playing a reel that had folks dancing in the street. Between them, on 40 acres that had once seemed worthless, something unprecedented had grown. Not just peace, but community. Not just tolerance, but understanding. Cole thought about Whitfield's offer, about the easy wealth he'd rejected. Looking at his father's watch, he knew he'd made the right choice. His father had wished for time to be his friend, and here, finally, it was. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad would come eventually. The army would investigate. Politicians would try to exploit or destroy what had been built. But tonight, with the medicine bag warm against his chest and his father's watch ticking steadily in his hand, Cole knew they'd created something worth defending. He stood, walked to the edge of his property where he could see both communities. Children had left toys scattered in the common area, a cloth doll next to a carved horse, a settler's ball beside a crow child's bow. Tomorrow they'd return, play together again, grow up in a world their parents had thought impossible. The moon rose, full and bright, illuminating the valley that had become a symbol of hope. Cole touched the medicine bag, feeling the beadwork Mourning Dove had crafted with such care. Protection from hatred, she'd said, looking at the peaceful valley, at the bridges built from trust and courage rather than wood and stone. Cole understood. The real protection wasn't from violence, but from the fear that made violence inevitable. He went inside, added a log to his fire, and sat at his table to write in the journal he'd started keeping. Someone should document this, he thought. Someone should write down how peace came riding into a valley everyone expected to run red with blood. How a starving woman and a poor cowboy and a war chief's wisdom had changed the destiny of two peoples. Outside, an owl called, and another answered. The night was full of life, full of promise, full of tomorrow's possibilities. Cole smiled, closed his journal, and prepared for bed. Dawn would bring work, always more work at the crossing. But it was good work, building something that mattered. As he lay down, he thought he heard it, the sound of the future being born in children's laughter, echoing between two communities that had chosen hope over hate. His father would have been proud. Mourning Dove had been right. Time had finally become his friend. I've told you this story of Cole Drifter and Mourning Dove because I needed you to know something I've learned after all these years of watching people build walls and burn bridges. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a blanket given to a stranger, a meal shared when you barely have enough, becomes the foundation for something impossible. Cole wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just a man with empty pockets and a full heart who couldn't walk past suffering. Mourning Dove wasn't trying to prevent a war. She was just a woman brave enough to speak truth when armies faced each other. Stone Wolf wasn't trying to change history. He was just a husband who chose to see the man who saved his wife rather than the enemy he'd expected to find. That's what family really is, not just blood, but the choice to see each other as human. The medicine bag Mourning Dove gave Cole protected him from hatred because gratitude is stronger than fear. Every time we choose to help instead of harm, to trust instead of suspect, we build another plank in the bridge between worlds. Cole's father wished for time to be his friend. In the end, it was. Not because time changed, but because Cole learned what was worth doing with it.